Greetings and salutations, all you beautiful individuals. You best believe it is another rep of League Unlock. My name is Eric flying a little Han Solo for a special epi today, and I call it a special epi because today we are assembling Exodia. No, we're not going through old Yu-Gi-Oh episodes. We are going through the history of some of the major regions today. It is the LCK, and we are putting together the ultimate all-pro team. That means we're taking not just a specific player from every role, but we're taking a specific era snapshot, the best of the best from their career. So a single year or split, it varies a little bit, but the absolute peak of some of these players and putting them to assemble the GOAT roster of all time. And truthfully, there might be a little bit of recency bias coming in to fruition for this, but I truly think this is the best team you could put together in the history of the LCK. And that's enough lead up. Let's just dive into some of this action. We go top side first, and listen, been a lot of elite level top laners over the years. Smeb 2016, Khan on the Longzhu years 2017, 2018, but you have to shout out, and by the way, the Shy is LPL, not LCK, even though he is from South Korea. He's played in the LPL his entire career. So, yes, we are bringing the God of Thunder. We are talking about Zeus on that top side, which I think a lot of people could agree with. When you look at a specific split or a year, there's plenty to choose from for Zeus, and it was honestly difficult to narrow down, but we went with 2023, and if you want to hyper-focus in, the 2023 World Championship is where this dude was absolutely embarrassing the competition. Obviously, the lasting impression is him picking up the MVP and dismantling the Shy in 3 straight games in that final series against Weibo, but we saw Zeus mainly on carries completely take over games. This guy was 11-2 on Jace throughout the entire 2023 calendar year, but the amount of pressure that he drew in the laning phase early on was absolutely, even if it was him dying, he didn't even need to be getting insane solo kills. It's just the amount of jungle attention that he demanded, even in these not one-sided matchups, even if he was, counter-picked at the very last part of pick ban. He was always an absolute menace that needed so much attention. And then, if he wasn't put down like that, we saw him take over countless games. And it feels like 2022, there were plenty of moments where you could highlight this guy being an absolute world beater, superstar to be. 2023 felt like when he really hit that stride, when you were talking about him as definitively the best top laner in the world, and the couple years to follow, you were still talking about that for the majority of it. But 2023, it really felt like there was this massive gap between him and everybody else, and the angle that he did. This is still when, of course, Cassante was very meta, and Cassante seems to be meta infinitely until the end of the existence of the universe. But kind of the first years of that, we saw him play tanks. Again, Cassante kind of not really a tank, but he was able to play carries and tanks, which is a very important criteria when you're putting together this star-studded all-time LCK squad, because as great as a player like Zeus was and is, you still have to make room for some of the other stars on this squad, because, there's a lot of really good players. And case in point, when you move to the jungle spot, it's another GOAT of the role when you are talking about a jungle canyon. And again, how do you pick what year? Even though they lost the World Championship in 2021, you could argue, I would accept arguments, that this was actually Canyon's best year, even though the sour grapes taste that you have after that World Finals against EDG, which is part of the reason why we're going 2020 for Canyon. And this is when he kind of changed the entire role with what his pathing was, the efficiency, and just how quickly he took over games for Damwon at the time. He had 3 times the XP differential at 15 among junglers in the LCK, 3 times higher than the second best in the league, which is an unheard of level of gap between the 2 best junglers in the LCK. He obviously got World Finals MVP. He had the lowest first blood victim rate amongst all junglers, which is insane considering how hyper aggressive he was in that early pathing, constantly invading and just putting pressure on the opposing jungler, but he was never the one to be getting caught out or giving over free gold early on. So this, again, it really felt like he changed. You can go through the summer split and to the World Championship, kind of those two different splits, and I mean both of them had absolutely absurd numbers coming out of this guy, and he was still so young at this point. Like when he was still Jungle King in like the 2019 area when he first came in, it basically took him 1 year, like half a year, to kind of find that true form. And obviously we've seen him evolve and progress, reach arguably new heights when he came over to this Gen G roster, but the first World Championship on Damwon Kia is where this guy really separated himself from the rest of the pack in terms of other junglers, not just in the LCK, but on that international stage. And I think the, let's say we're putting this all-time LCK team against other squads, and it is Fearless Draft, because that's what the modern LoL esports scene is. It is Fearless Draft coming in, and nobody is better at having these pocket picks to take over series than Canyon, even though maybe it was less of that action in 2020 summer when he was still newer onto the scene. It's no question he would still have the capabilities to take over some of these pocket picks, whether it's the Kane, whether it's the Kha'Zix, whether it's less so the Nidalee being a pocket pick and more just an absolute standout performer, but the meta being able to pop off picks like Nidalee, like Lee Sin, we've seen so many times this guy completely pop off, and he's been blessed with some pretty good laners. Showmaker and Nuguri in that 2020 Dom1 era were among the very best in the world, and it sounds like a burn to say Canyon is the best jungler when he has strong laners, because that makes it sound like he's reliant on his teammates, but really what it does is opens up the opportunity for him to just completely control the jungle when he does have solid laners that truthfully don't even need his help. And yeah, this roster would have that, so Canyon would be fully unleashed to take over a lot of the early game jungle, which is why he's the easy pick to be on this all-time LCK Exodia squad. Mid lane is where it gets a little bit tricky on this list, and you'll notice we actually have 6 spots on this squad. Yes, we are going to have a 6th man. It's only fair that you would bring a 6th man to an international event that is Fearless Draft. So I say that as a big preface as we announce the mid lane, because, there's a 6th man that we will get to. But we are talking about Chovy reaching what I view as maybe not even his final form, but his Omega form, and that was the 2024 season for Gen G. This is when he won back-to-back regular season MVPs in the LCK. He put together a calm, cool, collected little 78.5% win rate. Gen G were completely dominating domestically, and I know you can call it a fizzle out at the World Championship, but even when they lost in those semifinals, it was still probably Chovy's best international run. He won that MSI to kind of get the international monkey off his back and avoid the choky allegations. But this is where you saw him evolve from just being an absolute lane kingdom bully with ludicrous CS numbers that, let's face it, sometimes didn't necessarily translate into team fight impacts, even if he had a sizable gold lead, because he was maybe a little too zeroed in, focused on those laning numbers, those side lanes, just farming, getting ludicrous leads, but not actually being able to do anything with them. Most of that changed in 2024 because we saw him kind of switch and have that emphasis on getting his teammates ahead. He doesn't need a 2K gold lead. Maybe spread that wealth out a little bit to help his side lanes and other teammates out. Not that 2024 Gen G, needed that much help in any of these lanes, but we saw that evolution of Chovy and making sure it's the team play coming out ahead, and that's when this guy was just absolutely terrifying, became pretty much the consensus pick for best player heading into that 2024 World Championship. And again, you talk about potentially being on Fearless Draft. What is I think at least criminally underrated in terms of Chovy is the absolute depth of the champion ocean that this guy has had over his career. Basically any new pick that comes into the meta, almost faster than anyone else in the mid lane is he able to pick up some of these new picks and not just play them, but play them at an incredibly high level, to the point where other professional mid laners are probably trying to emulate what this dude is doing in the mid lane. And that kind of goes in tandem with a guy like Canyon is at the forefront of, again, other pro players kind of seeing what this guy is doing for pathing, and him being the VODs that other pro players are studying. I think Chovy laning for sure, but even in terms of team fight positioning after that, these are the case study guys, the go-to examples for how to play your role at the absolute highest level. Crazy that they, this isn't even just a full Exodia team. These guys are actually teammates. This isn't some hypothetical, man, can you imagine putting this team together? They were actually not the years that we've picked. This was Damwon, Canyon, and Genji Chovy, but still absolute upper echelon tier players that they have been throughout their entire careers, and these were the absolute two peaks for them. We go to the bot lane, and it's, more of the same. Guys who have actually played together on a squad, but this is the year that they were not on the squad together when Ruler left the LCK, his first year on JDG. Everyone's saying, well, maybe there's going to be an adjustment period. There might be some communication barriers to get over. This guy was picking up a pentakill in his very first split. He was absolutely styling on the entire LPL, and they quickly came to learn why the LCK had been the premier region for the last couple of years. And we're picking this year for Ruler. There's been countless incredible splits on Gen G, but 2023, that first year with JDG where they went on to sweep the entire LPL, they were 2 close series away from completing that golden road. I know Guma kind of styled on Ruler in those semifinals at Worlds, but you look at that, I'm including that entire year body of work in 2023, and I think Ruler was clearly the best AD carry at the time, and it's one of the best year stretches that we've ever seen out of an AD carry. Obviously Zeri was a little bit overtuned, you might say, at that point, but nobody made it even more terrifying than Ruler on that pick. And I think what's an important thing to note for this squad is he played at this high a level with there probably being a lapse in communication, because obviously didn't speak the same language as his support in Missing at the time, and a lot of the other players, pretty much everybody but Kanavi, of course, wasn't speaking the same language. So the fact that he could just become a plug-and-play player on this JDG squad and be one of the very best, if not the best in the world at the time, one of the best years of all time, well, that speaks leaps and bounds to, okay, let's slot him on with 5 South Korean players who are all going to be speaking the same language, and oh my gosh, Ruler, be absolutely unstoppable. And again, insane that Canyon, Chovy, Ruler all became teammates on Gen G. Maybe not in their peakist, most peak, whatever the correct terminology is there, but still absolute lethal forces on the Rift, and one of the best, putting together one of the best rosters of all time. But JDG 2023 Ruler, that just hit a little bit different, because it was pretty much every single series, even if they were matching up against the bottom feeder in the LPL, it became a must-see match, because you knew Ruler was going to do some ridiculous 2v4 outplay, nearly get a penta, or have some moment that left you wondering, wow, how does this guy do? How does he even see the angles for this? And it kind of carries the theme that we were just talking about with Canyon and Chovy. This was the guy to watch for aspiring pro players, someone just trying to get through bronze, maybe up to gold, or teams in the very same league. You were watching VODs of Ruler in the laning phase. You were watching VODs of him taking over these team fights, knowing when to flash forward, when to ignore the tank and go and try and kill the backline in a couple of hits. It was just an absolute masterclass across the board, as we have grown so accustomed to over the career of Ruler. But 2023 was the apex, it felt like, of that star AD carry when he first went over to the LPL. Who do we pair alongside Ruler? And in the support spot, there's been some GOATs over the years in the LCK, Mata an easy pick to talk about, but we got to bring a guy who, in his very first year, his rookie split, you were already talking about him as a top 3 support in the world. And I feel like now, 5+ years into his career, it's safe to say Kiria might be the best AD carry, or best support of all time. Sometimes he's the best AD carry, even on his team, and no other time was that more obvious than in 2022 spring. This is the year that T1 goes 18-0 in the regular season. Kiria picks up MVP, and much like Canyon earlier on the list, these are guys who changed their roles, shaped the entire meta of the time. This is when Kiria was cooking 34 different champions. Let's just list some of the things he was playing in the bot lane. This is before AD carry support was really popping off in the meta, but he was playing Ashe a couple of times. We had a Heimerdinger game, Zac, Yasuo, Wukong, Rumble. He wasn't playing top lane. This is support Kiria bringing out some dark technology, and in this spring split, him and Gumayusi were just completely embarrassing other bot lanes on the daily. Any rift, any matchup, any team, these guys were light years ahead of anybody else in the bottom lane, and obviously you take in a little bit of inherent synergy. Kiria and Ruler did play some games together on the Asian Games roster, where the LCK ended up winning that, but that's kind of what you're looking at when you're putting together this squad, is basically some of the Asian Games roster, but we're picking from different eras. Again, 2022 Kiria matched up with 2023 Ruler. There were some games where Ruler just had a Yuumi on his back when he was doing some of these 2v4s, which is an absolute shame that's ever been a meta for Kiria, because we are denied the greatness of this player when he's stuck on the cat on a book, just moving around with whatever AD carry. He's obviously much better when he's able to cook up some of these absolutely incredible picks, but it doesn't really matter what year you're choosing to have Ruler and Kiria as a bot lane. It would be absolutely, I don't think any other region could get a bot lane that's even close to matching up against them. You'd have to have whatever the B tier bot lane for the LCK Exodia squad, which would be pretty good in its own right. But 2022, the undefeated run where T1 was playing through their bot lane more than ever. Zeus was still kind of early on in his development at that point, especially in that spring split, which we're really zeroing in on for Kiria, when he was hands down the best player, not just on T1, but in the entire LCK, well deserving of that MVP. So we got the 5 players. That's it. That's your squad. It feels like there might be an iconic LCK player that we're missing out on. Yes, we're going to have a 6-man, and yes, we can't get through this list without referencing, acknowledging the GOAT. Faker, of course, is on an LCK all-time Exodia squad. Just wanted to be a little bit dramatic and make you wait for him. The truth is, you would probably split time with who's playing in that mid lane when you have that Chovy 2024 era and Faker. The only question is, what era of Faker do you want in? Do you want the 2017 Worlds 1v9 Faker that had to drag his teammates kicking and screaming to the finals? Well, probably not, because you have a much more stacked lineup than that SKT roster did. So maybe he doesn't have to do that incredible heavy lifting. Maybe you go 2024 Worlds with some impeccable Galio performances, or dominant team play to get the rest of the squads involved. Yeah, I would accept that. 2023 or 2024, specifically Worlds, because there were slumps mired throughout those years. But those tournament runs you could highlight. But we're going consistency, we're going comfort, we're going 2015 Faker, where yes, you can say his game evolved and he got even better like a fine wine later in his career, but 2015, he already had a couple of years under his belt, and it already felt like he had fully figured out the game. How about an 80% win rate for SKT, and he had a 31.7% kill share, which is almost a third of the kills Faker was getting whenever he suited up for SKT. He had such a, obviously he has an aura about him now, but in 2015 it felt even thicker because there were no challengers for him at that point. They had a single loss during that incredibly dominant Worlds run. He had the undefeated LeBlanc that EDG created a whole team comp to just try and counter. Imagine this LCK Exodia squad and teams were drafting entire comps to try and shut down Faker, and then the next game you could go, well, we subbed in Chovy now, who has a different champion pool altogether, or, oh, you're focusing an entire comp on our mid laner, we have Zeus and Ruler as the other carries. Oh, and Canyon in there as well. Absolutely unstoppable. And the other angle why you take 2015 Faker is he was accustomed. He had the mental acuity of being subbed out. They won an entire LCK title with Easy Hoon in the mid lane. Faker didn't even suit up for those spring finals that they ended up winning. So he would have that mental edge of saying, okay, Chovy, you can sub in, you can play some games, because let's be honest, as good as Easy Hoon's Azir was in 2015, if you're getting subbed out or seeding games to 2024 Chovy, I think you'd have to be understanding or accepting of that. So yes, you throw in the sixth man. Yes, you could say, is Chovy the sixth man or is Faker the sixth man? It doesn't matter. Both of these guys would be too good not to be assembled into this Exodia. And again, I know this is similar to what they put together as an Asian Games roster, where I think Faker played like 2 games and Chovy did most of the heavy lifting. But Faker wasn't in the peak form or close to it during that Asian Games roster. We're hand-picking the best of the best splits and years for a lot of these players, which makes it even more terrifying. Imagine a 2015 Faker versus a 2024 Chovy as a head-to-head. I mean, that would be pretty damn fun in its own mind. You could truthfully make 4, 5, 6 of these teams with different players, and the LCK would probably be the best of the best, except for the elite of the LPL and maybe one European roster that's just entirely 2019 G2. But at the very least, seeing Faker and Chovy on the same team would always be an absolute treat. But that is it today for League Unlocked. My name is Eric. Thank you to all you beautiful people for supporting and joining us as always, and we'll catch you on that flippity flip.